Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War News Update. First part thereof for the 15th of October 2024. Let's get straight to where we normally start. Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, of course. You can find them in the description to my video below. 1,210 personnel lost is a high number there, going towards the upper end of that rather arbitrary range I've set of 1,000 to 1,300. Anything over 1,000 is just obscenely high anyway. 1,210 just must hurt the Russians all the more. 13 tanks is above the daily average, so a fairly significant number there, as is 44 troop-carrying AFVs. That is a good 2 times the daily average and some. We have lower than the daily average in artillery systems, and I wonder what the reason for that is. I know there are clouds, rain and whatnot, so that might have affected drone activity, but we haven't seen that reflected in the other categories. No MLRS or anti-aircraft warfare systems. We have 32 vehicles and fuel tanks and 4 pieces of special equipment. So a fairly challenging day for the Russians there. That low number of drones represents 2 nights. 2 nights ago, there were none at all. Last night, there were only 17. So we've had fairly quiet nights for 2 nights in a row in that respect. Okay, when we look at the Andrew Perpetual loss list, we can see the combat asset losses. Well, first of all, it's about ignoring the black ones at the bottom. It's almost a 1-to-1 ratio. Russians have lost just a little bit more in combat asset losses terms. It's about a 2-to-1 loss, Russian to Ukrainian, maybe a tad under. So we have, a slightly closer day in some respects. Okay, not really too bothered about the surveillance and comms equipment and even the drone loss there. Artillery, we've got 3 on the loss list here, 2 destroyed, 1 damaged. They look like Western supplied. I'm not sure actually. The RAC SA-12, not sure what that is. It's interesting looking down the causes at the side. We have FPV drones, drone drop bombs, shellings in there, Lancet, and what do we have? Night vision FPV drones, tipped over into a crater, unfortunately, often finds its way there. ATGM on an MRAP, so not often we see them. Okay, so going down the combat asset losses, a couple of IFVs, 1 abandoned, 1 damaged. The abandoned is CV-90. That's abandoned then hit by Lancet. That's going to be pretty annoying. That's a decent one. Well, most of the ones they use at the moment are fairly decent, although I say that the other one is a BMP here that's been damaged. APCs, we have 4 M113s, MTLB, 3 of them abandoned, 2 damaged, and a couple of damaged MRAPs. The damaged to destroyed and abandoned ratio is all right for the Ukrainians today, although there aren't too many pieces of kit to be added to the list. When we look at the Russian losses, we have an excavator. We've got quite a few bits of artillery here. Some 2A-36 Jets in B and 2A-65 Mr. Bs. So self-propelled Pion as well. That's a huge self-propelled howitzers featuring quite a bit there. A couple of them destroyed, but most of them damaged. That's fairly normal for artillery. For the tanks, we have 6 tanks, 4 of them destroyed, 2 damaged. A couple of tracked garden sheds there. Some BMPs, 3 infantry fighting vehicles, a number of APCs, 4, and an MRAP. So nothing too crazy. Damage to destroyed ratio is about 50-50, maybe a tad over in terms of destroyed. A few trucks and quite a few civilian vehicles as per normal. Nothing too crazy on both lists there, showing, I think, that both sides are attacking. Ukraine is attacking still up in Kursk, but also doing active defense up there, as well as the Russians are trying to really push back heavily, particularly on the western side. Andrew Perpetua adds, the past few days, Russia has been doing significantly less overnight shelling on Ukraine. This doesn't apply to everywhere, but generally speaking. Nor is it predictive of anything or mean anything, because these sorts of ebbs and flows flows happen often, but it is nice. You could draw a conclusion. One speculation could be that The Russians are running a little bit shorter of artillery ammunition, and this is a reflection thereof. I don't know if that's the case, though. Andrew here is quite definite to say it's not predictive and doesn't really mean anything. It's just nice, but it could mean something. I don't know. There are rumors that the Russians, they are using 50%, supposedly 50% North Korean artillery ammunition at the moment. So they are evidently short of ammunition in order to have got themselves into that situation. Right, what's short of ammunition compared to where they traditionally have been throughout the war. Here's an interesting video from CJ, or not from him, but he's looking at it. It's the one that has the Archer. You remember yesterday there's a Swedish self-propelled howitzer that was taken out. It was really badly damaged, and on Andrew's list, he put it as damaged, but said it would need, a big old overhaul. So this is a wheeled self-propelled howitzers. Aren't necessarily the future, says CJ, who is associated with the Turetsk. I think he's an active artilleryman. He says, let me explain. In this video, multiple Russian drones and the BM-30 Smerch multiple rocket launcher work to attack a Ukrainian 155mm Archer from Sweden. Archers are incredible pieces of artillery, but you need many different types, as almost all tubed systems with the current ammo will be vulnerable to long-range MRLs and FPVs as well. Video below is a Caesar suffering. So while towed guns are also vulnerable on roads, they're easier to conceal. The solution, a mix of small and large guns and no shoot and scoot. So CJ adding to the voices that are saying shoot and scoot is now kind of obsolete as a tactic because of the drone proliferation. You move your artillery, you get seen. So he's saying that there's an advantage to towed artillery, although it's not so great on the roads and you have to tow it on roads, etc., etc. It's a smaller kind of footprint and it's easier to hide it in tree lines and whatnot, and it's got a higher survivability potentially due to these roaming FPV drones or reconnaissance drones. What's the solution? He says, how many lessons should be taken from Ukraine? Obviously the US Army would fight very differently, but do you believe the biggest threats to our artillery pieces might be massive amounts of drones? Then you should be considering how Ukraine has adapted. And he's got a January 2023 thread on can towed artillery still be an asset in a modern battlefield. Let's take a look at the M777s, the most numerous 155mm systems that NATO artillery system in Ukraine today, and talks about how they hide them and utilize them. So he continues in this thread to be 100% clear. Self-propelled guns have a role in the future, but you cannot outrun every threat regardless of how fast you can emplace and displace and how far you can shoot. One destroyed system isn't an indictment of a piece of kit. Just an observation on my part. I love Sweden and the Archer. And this is the thing, the Archer is a fabulous bit of kit, but all of these big self-propelled guns are vulnerable to being spotted in this kind of warfare that we're seeing play out in Ukraine. So he's another proponent of saying, if shoot and scoot isn't obsolete, then it should be seen in a mix. Like nothing is obsolete. You need kind of a bit of everything in order to adapt to all the different threats that exist out there. Okay, it's not something I haven't said before though. Right, here's a video. I'm not going to play it to you because lots of things getting blown up in Turetsk, and these are Russians going about the business. There's some snipers. There's someone trying to put a bit of equipment up inside a building. There are the random people in these sort of hidey holes and what have you. And this is just a montage of drones going around hunting people out. So this guy's got this long stick trying to put some kind of equipment, stick it to the wall, I think, and it just gets blown up. And as I say, snipers and whatnot. It just shows that there is nowhere that is safe. When you've got drones, we just talked about it with regard to shoot and scoot, you've got a cityscape here or a town with these higher apartment buildings and rubble all over the place, loads of places to hide, and yet people are still struggling to hide from the ever snooping drones. This is a drone war we are seeing play out in front of us. And this montage in Turetsk shows you how vulnerable everyone is. There's just eyes in the sky. When you have multiple eyes in the sky, where can you hide? It must be horrible being an infantryman or even mechanized. You know, if you're driving any piece of kit around, it's just drones. They're bloody everywhere. But there you go. Now, the commander of the, I don't know if this is worth mentioning, the commander of the 9th Assault Detachment of the Russian Wagner Group, Michael Prokhorko, has been killed in combat with militants in Mali by the Tuaregs on October the 12th, according to a Wagner statement. He participated in the Battle of Bakhmut, according to the Ukrainian Mirovoretz database. You have Wagner people who are still working out in Africa, leaving probably after the failed mutiny in the Prigozhin mutiny in Russia, and they have been sort of continuing to work for the Russians on behalf of Russia, but just abroad, and they are having a bit of trouble, spot bother in Mali particularly. Now, interesting today that the MFA, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, has answered, I think, a Le Monde article that has stated that Ukraine, I think the claim is Ukraine are providing drones to rebels in, I think, Mali. And this is how you are getting these successes of taking out. There have been 2 columns of Malian or equipment, Wagner equipment that have been blown up in Mali. So there have been two massive sets of losses there. And then also you've got this guy, this Wagnerite dying. I don't know what the particular situation could have been in one of those convoy strikes recently. We know, we've got a pretty good idea that Ukraine have been involved to some degree. We've seen a Ukrainian with a Ukrainian flag hanging out with, doing a sort of photo opportunity with those Tuareg rebels. Are they providing drones to them? The MFA has come out and said this is definitely Russian information. They've been really strong on repudiating that claim, but it is out there. It is a Russian claim. There's certainly some issues going on in Russia, and Wagner are on the receiving end of a couple of bloody noses. Okay, flash news reports an explosive fire breaking out in Yakutia, Russia, at a building materials production facility. The flames are spread over an area of 1,200 square meters. Explosions can be heard in the video, but not yet known what exactly caused the fire. It's just another Russia on fire incident. And in fact, it doesn't stop there. In Angarsk, around 4,500 kilometers east of Moscow, big warehouses are on fire. The size of the fire in Irkutsk region extended to over 1,000 square meters at its height, but no injuries were reported. So 2 big old fire incidences in Russia again. These keep going. Right, relatively quiet night in terms of strikes. I heard last night that there were lots of Ukrainian drones in the air. I've not heard anything mentioned today though. So I don't know if that was just untrue or there have been some strikes deep into Russia, but we just don't know what has happened. There's no news there's no pictures out of the strikes. Who knows? Keep our ears close to the ground, I guess, today. Now, in terms of the Russian strikes into Ukraine, is this a quiet night? Still 17 drones, in terms of drones at least, is not the biggest number of drones we've seen. But then we've just been really used to nights of 40, 50, 60 drones being sent into Ukraine. Now, 2 nights ago, there was 0 drones. Last night, only 17. I think, conclusion we can draw is that Russia is struggling to get hold of their drones or manufacture their drones. They've had some stockpiles that have just recently been destroyed. And I think you are seeing the effect in a reduction in nightly drone attacks. Now, of the 17 drones sent in, 12 were shot down. I've seen some footage of the French Mistral, that was out yesterday actually, Mistral man-pads taking down aerial targets at night. So they've got all sorts of different ways of taking these drones down. 12 out of the 17 intercepted, 4 of them taken out due to electronic warfare. That leaves 1 that has got through. The worry outside of the drones is that 9 missiles were sent, none were shot down. 7 of them were S-300 ballistic missiles, and they were predominantly sent against Mykolaiv, just to the northwest of Kherson, and that took one hell of a beating last night. 2 Kh-59 cruise missiles also got through. So in Mykolaiv, here we see some of the damage done at night. Russians hit Mykolaiv with S-300 missiles. A woman was killed, 16 people were injured. Residential area, infrastructure, private homes, cars, restaurant complex, market caught fire and were damaged. It appears, at least according to the Ukrainians here, that these strikes were on, prima facie, at least residential, commercial infrastructure has been hit. You can see that from the pictures. And these are not missiles that you're going to be able to intercept or affect with electronic warfare. These are ballistic missiles used, surface-to-air missiles used in a ground attack mode. Very fast-moving missiles. So what they hit is either intended or just a bit inaccurate. And yeah, we see again, another example of a Ukrainian city getting hammered by Russian missiles, and the international community looks on. We have days of Ukrainian POWs being executed, days in a row of this happening. The international community looks on. We have, I'm going to just read you my last one first, actually. Ukraine is now supposed to defeat both Russia and North Korea. So we hear even Zelensky mentioned it. This is a war now against North Korea. North Korean soldiers there are some reports that they are around Mariupol, reports that they're training, possibly in Russia, I don't know. But it appears that North Koreans are actively involved in a war. Not only are they providing weaponry and ammunition to Russia to fight against Ukraine, but now they are providing personnel. So Ukraine, says Maria Popova, is now supposed to defeat both Russia and North Korea alone, while the West refuses to supply sufficient or advanced weapons to allow it to strike Russia. It's fairly clear that the West is okay with some form of Russian victory and isn't sufficiently afraid that Russia would go beyond Ukraine. Europe will regret this. It's insane. Like, North Korea's involvement should be like the number one bit of news around the world. This is, I had a big rant about 2 weeks ago on Facebook saying, just to let you guys know, we are sort of in World War III here. And one of my friends was like, yeah, stop being alarmist, a load of bollocks, blah, blah, blah. American friend. And I had a bit of a rant, and I was like, no, really, this is what's going on. And I laid out one after the other. And in the end, he's like, all right. Because I was like, look, we are doing everything we can. We're providing weapons. We're providing financial assistance. We're involved in economic warfare. We're involved in cyber warfare. We're involved in information warfare with Russia, all of us, right? Our taxpayer dollars are going towards supporting Ukraine. We are doing everything but providing frontline troops to Ukraine. But we are providing troops to train their troops. And the UK is, among other nations, trying to get troops inside Ukraine to do that training. There are almost certainly special forces troops inside Ukraine from a number of these countries. We are doing everything we can. We are getting together as allied nations and thinking up ways to, the Ukraine Defense Contact Group. We are investing in Ukrainian defense industry. We're investing in our own industries to support Ukraine, to provide as much equipment as we think we can. Of course, I think we can do more, etc., etc. And then they are getting equipment from Iran. They're using Iranian missiles. They're using Iranian drones, North Korean ammunition and equipment, including missiles, ammunition, and North Korean APCs we've seen, haven't we? And we've now seen Chinese armoured vehicles, Chinese buggies, and non-lethal military equipment from China. This is a case of picking sides. We are, to some degree, involved in a war. And when North Korea are sending their troops, what more evidence do you need that this is some kind of world war? Where we've got at least 50 nations supporting Ukraine very directly. And then you've got others, also on the peripheries. And you've got a bunch of nations supporting Russia. and you've got a very hot war going on. Yeah. Anyway, rant over. Ukrainians' trust for Zelensky has stabilized at 59%, which is good news. Going this far into the war, it's no surprise that the war leader will be suffering in the polls. It's a really difficult position to be in, especially when you've still got the Soviet legacy of corruption and all that kind of thing to deal with. Then you've got mobilization to deal with. You've got a war where you've tirelessly been going around the world trying to drum up that support I've just been talking about, and still people are reluctant to support enough. And still the US is forcing restrictions on the use of missiles, and so you have people in these major cities getting hammered by guided glide bombs. Kharkiv, Ukraine's second biggest city, is just, we are allowing Russia to hit that city with impunity because we don't allow Ukraine to use the weaponry that they need to use. Meanwhile, as mentioned, Russia's perfectly able to use Iranian and North Korean weaponry to do exactly the same. It's just what is going on. So yeah, it's good news to see that his popularity has stabilized. Right, Ukrainians in occupied territories are to lose free medication without Russian passports. So this is actually a war crime as far as I understand it. If you're forcing nationalization, I think that is a war crime. Starting in 2025, Ukrainians with diabetes, bronchial asthma, and other illnesses in Russian occupied territories will lose access to free medications unless they acquire Russian passports, according to the Eastern Human Rights Group. Ukraine's National Resistance Center condemned this policy as an act of genocide. Yeah, I think it is one of the forms. You are wiping out the identity of a people by force assimilating them. Aimed at erasing Ukrainian identity. More than 60 Ukrainian embassies around the world have received bomb threats. Security has been stepped up. No details on exactly when the threats were made or if they are coordinated, says Tim White. And check out my chat with Tim White yesterday. It's a great conversation on the live. So click on the live tab after you've watched this and check out what we had to say. The Russian fleet can no longer influence the course of hostilities in Ukraine, said Navy spokesman Dmitry Platenchuk. Quote, colleagues from intelligence can answer this question more professionally. I can point out that whatever the degree of readiness and the number of units, it actually cannot affect the course of hostilities in our theatre. In other words, the Russian Black Sea Fleet is somewhat impotent with regards to affecting the war. I presume they're still releasing the odd cruise missile, but generally not doing an awful lot else. According to reports on Russian channels, someone has been placing dragon's teeth, concrete and anti-tank obstacles on roads in the Kursk region at night. These roads are used by Russian soldiers attempting to flee from Ukrainian FPV drones. It's claimed that within 24 hours, 40 people were killed and an equal number were wounded due to these obstacles. A witness described the danger. I was driving back and almost crashed into them. Didn't want to risk the fields in the dark, so I took the road. I barely avoided the second set. Frustration is growing among soldiers, with one remarking, quote, in just a few days, we've had more casualties, including irrecoverable losses from these damned dragon's teeth than from enemy drones. Your dragon is fighting on the wrong side. While some blame sabotage groups, it's clear that such large obstacles couldn't have been placed by hand alone. Yeah, so I don't know what's going on here, but it appears that someone is putting dragon's teeth across roads, possibly to try and, be defensive there. But at night, Russian vehicles are just driving full pelt into them. There's some images of some crashed vehicles. No, it's not on this thread. But you can see some other images of the result of driving into that at 150 kilometers an hour. Okay. No intact buildings are left in Turetsk is the quote here. Accelerating Russian advance, military says. So I showed you those drones active in Turetsk. Well, Turetsk is really becoming a bit of a hellscape. Quote, now the town looks more like a desert planet. There are no shelters or civilians or for civilians or soldiers, and unfortunately this allows the enemy to occupy new areas but on scorched earth, says Anastasia Bobnikova, a spokesperson for the operational tactical group of Luhansk. And when it comes to Russian advances, in recent months, Russia has begun to advance actively on the front line. In August and September 2024, the Russians seized 5.5 times more territory than in all of 2023. The main reason for this is the lack of weapons and a change in Russian tactics. So the Russians have changed the way they are doing things. They're basically, like we just heard, obliterating towns and then walking in after doing so. It's the aviation, the guided glide bombs that have been so effective now for the past, I guess, year they've been using them. But more recently, they've really ramped up their activities and taking more and more territory. Certainly a concern. And that's enough from me for the first video of the day. Take care, everybody. I really appreciate your support. I really, really do. Big shout out to Julian Rossiter again, as ever. Always appreciate his support. Nick Stanton, massive thank you to you, and Mr. Winkler as well. Really appreciate your support, guys. It's absolutely incredible. We are going to be having the NAFO truck campaign starting very shortly. I am in the process of sorting out an interview with Alex from NAFO as well, so that'll be really good. Thank you to GIR, who is prompting me so often on that. I exist on so many different platforms, and that's why I struggle to, personal messages that you guys send me. Sometimes it's weeks before I get to you because it's all going on. So sorry, but it's just the nature of the beast. Thank you to JR, who's helping also with the mapping. And thank you to Benny, who's helping with so much stuff. He's kind of come on board with ATP Geo. So thank you to him for that. Anyway, take care, y'all, and I'll speak to you soon.